Manhattan never slept, but it did quiet down just a little by the time the children were tucked in and the city's glow softened into something almost peaceful. On the 42nd floor of an Upper East Side penthouse, Jasmine Carter was humming softly as she turned off the overhead lights in the twins' room. They were already asleep, tiny limbs tangled in cartoon sheets, the plush skyline glittering beyond their windows. Jasmine glanced at the antique clock on the wall. 9:37 p.m. She exhaled. Another long day. The parents, as usual, were working late, which usually meant charity dinners, investor meetings, or whatever social engagements billionaires attended to remain billionaires. Jasmine didn't judge. It wasn't her job to. But that didn't stop the ache in her chest whenever she walked into silence night after night, knowing these kids rarely heard their mother's voice before bed. Tonight, she lingered a little longer by the bedside. "I can't sleep," said Theo, one of the twins, half whining, half yawning. "Want a story?" Jasmine offered gently. He shook his head. "A song?" He nodded. And that's when it happened. Without thinking, Jasmine slipped into a melody that had lived in her bones long before she ever picked up a pacifier or changed a diaper. It started soft, just a hum. Then it grew, the opening of Vici d'arte from Puccini's Tosca, in flawless Italian. Her voice didn't ask permission. It rose like it had a life of its own, echoing through the marble corridors of the penthouse. It was a sound that didn't belong in a nursery. It belonged in velvet-curtained theaters, in balconies lined with chandeliers, and in the hallway, just outside the door, someone froze. Graham Weston had arrived home earlier than planned, unannounced, silently. His driver had dropped him off without alerting the staff. He was tired of the handshakes, the false laughter, the endless wine swirling in glasses while people whispered about art as though it were a commodity instead of a cry for meaning. He just wanted quiet. And what he found instead was a voice. Not just any voice. Her voice. His breath caught. He hadn't heard that aria since Meredith. His late wife, the star of the Royal Opera House. The woman who could make Puccini weep. The woman whose absence had turned his home into a museum of silence. And now this Nanny, this woman he'd barely spoken to beyond polite nods, was standing in his children's bedroom, resurrecting something he thought was long buried. He didn't move until she stopped. Jasmine stepped into the hallway, eyes wide when she saw him. "Oh, Mr. Weston, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you come in." He didn't speak for a moment. His eyes were locked on hers, unreadable. "That was—" he began, then stopped. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in hours. "That was Puccini." She nodded, immediately flustered. "It's just a lullaby, really. They like the melody." "A lullaby," he echoed, eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you sing professionally?" Her posture stiffened. "No, sir. I used to study at Juilliard. Voice." His brows lifted ever so slightly. "Juilliard. Before," she added quickly, "before life happened." Silence settled again, not tense, but heavy. "Well," he finally said, "thank you. Good night." He turned and walked away, not giving her a chance to explain further. She stood frozen, heart pounding in her ears. The door to his study clicked shut behind him. By morning, everything changed. She was called into the back parlor by Mrs. Lindholm, the family's logistics manager. Always professional, never warm. "We're releasing you from your duties," the woman said briskly. "Your final paycheck will be wired by the end of the day. No need to return next week." Jasmine blinked. What? Why? Was it something It's a scheduling conflict, nothing personal. But the look in her eyes said otherwise. Cold, controlled, practiced. Jasmine left the penthouse in tears. Her pride barely held together by the strap of her tote bag. She'd spent 3 years with this family, helped their daughter through nightmares, cleaned up their son's broken leg. She never asked for more. Just respect, just decency. And now, fired. Over a song. She rode the subway home in silence. The city's noise dulled to a blur. Her studio apartment in Harlem welcomed her like it always did, quietly, cheaply, barely holding itself together. She curled up on her worn couch, questioning everything. She shouldn't have sung. She should have stuck to lullabies in English. Should have remembered that in some houses, a black woman is only safe if she's silent. As the evening sun slanted across her cracked windows, a knock startled her. She wiped her face, opened the door. A man in a charcoal suit stood outside. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Yes?" He handed her a thick envelope. "You're expected at Teterboro Airport tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Terminal 3. A car will pick you up." "What is this?" she asked, confused. He offered a small, polite nod. An invitation. Inside the envelope, a single plane ticket. First class. No, private. To Seattle. And a note. "I heard a voice I thought the world had lost. I need you to sing again. G.W." Her breath caught. She stared at the note for a long time, her heart racing. Could this be real? Could this be? She didn't sleep that night. Her suitcase sat open but empty. What does one pack for a mystery summons by a billionaire who hadn't spoken more than 5 words to her until yesterday? At 8:45 a.m. the next day, she stood in front of a sleek private jet, her hair pulled back, heart in her throat. The man waiting at the stairs was unmistakable. Graham Weston. No suit today, just dark jeans, a crisp jacket, and a look that was less businessman and more man-haunted by memory. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure I should." "I wasn't sure you would," he replied. She looked at the jet, then at him. "Why?" "Because yesterday," he said, his voice low, "you gave me back something I thought I'd buried with my wife." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. He gestured to the plane. "Seattle, Weston Arts Gala. One night. No obligations. Just sing." Jasmine hesitated, then stepped forward, because somewhere inside her a voice had awakened, one that refused to be silenced again. The plane hummed with quiet luxury, cream leather seats, walnut accents. A bottle of untouched champagne sat chilled between them, but neither Jasmine nor Graham reached for it. She sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap, wearing the only blazer she owned, black, 3 years out of fashion, slightly too warm. It wasn't made for this altitude, or this kind of silence. Graham, across from her, watched the clouds. Not her. Not directly. "Why me?" she asked at last, her voice a thread in the white noise of the engines. He didn't look at her. "Because I made a vow. After Meredith died, I swore I'd never listen to opera again. Jasmine's breath caught. She knew the name. Meredith Leor Weston, the voice of a generation, his wife. Dead 3 years now and still spoken of in reverent tones by critics and musicians alike. I couldn't, he continued. Every aria sounded hollow without her. And then last night, standing outside that room, it wasn't just a song. It was her ghost. Jasmine looked down. It wasn't meant to be a performance. But it was, he said, to me. The jet began its slow descent. Seattle's green coast blinked beneath a curtain of gray cloud. She leaned forward, palms sweaty against her knees. You didn't have to fire me, she said softly. Now he turned to her. I didn't. She blinked. Your manager said Lindholm acted on her own. She thought she was protecting my family's privacy. He paused. When I found out this morning, she was reassigned. Jasmine didn't know what to say. Gratitude wasn't the right word. Neither was forgiveness. She thought I overstepped, Jasmine muttered. She didn't understand that you saved something. They landed without further words. A sleek black car waited at the tarmac, whisking them toward a towering hotel near the water, the venue of the Weston Arts Gala. Every year, Graham Weston brought together collectors, patrons, musicians, and artists from around the world for a single evening of unfiltered creativity. And money. Jasmine had heard of it, of course, but she never imagined herself anywhere near it, much less inside it. By 7 p.m., the ballroom shimmered with excess. Glass chandeliers, custom floral installations, an imported Bosendorfer grand piano, and 300 guests in gowns and tuxedos that sparkled under soft golden light. Jasmine stood near the service entrance in a simple navy blue dress, borrowed from the wardrobe team. It wasn't designer. It wasn't meant to compete. It was just enough to blend in, or try to. The guests didn't recognize her. Why would they? She wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't the name on their phones or the face on the museum board. She was a whisper in their world. And then the music stopped. The host, a tall woman with silver hair and a microphone smile, took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are honored to present a special performance, an artist none of you have heard before, but one you will never forget. Jasmine's heart plummeted. Her name appeared on the projection behind the stage. Simple, stark. Jasmine Carter, soprano. A spotlight hit the piano, and she froze. No, she whispered. I can't. This wasn't the deal. You said no obligations. Graham appeared beside her, calm, quiet. No one will make you walk out there, he said. But if you don't, that voice goes back to sleep, maybe for good. She shook her head. These people, they'll laugh. They'll smile politely. They'll say it was sweet that the help gave it a shot. Graham leaned closer, voice barely above a breath. You're not the help. You're the sound I thought I'd never hear again. Tears stung her eyes. You're not Meredith, he added. You're Jasmine, and that's the point. She stood for a long moment, paralyzed by a fear so old it had teeth. Fear of being seen and judged, of not being seen at all. Then her feet moved, one step, then another, onto the stage. The audience murmured, confused, curious. She nodded to the pianist, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, and whispered a single word, Tosca. The first notes floated from the piano, tentative, haunting, and then Jasmine sang. It wasn't perfect. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew, filled the space, filled the gaps between champagne glasses and idle chatter. Her Italian was pure, her vibrato natural. The aria rose like smoke, filling every inch of the ballroom until the room itself seemed to pause. Conversations died, faces turned, the air changed. By the final crescendo, not a soul moved. A single tear rolled down the cheek of a woman in the front row. Someone else whispered, "Who is she?" Jasmine hit the last note and let it ring. Then silence, heavy, reverent, and then applause, not polite, not performative. Thunder. People rose to their feet. Someone shouted, "Encore!" Others were already pulling out phones, searching for her name, trying to understand how this voice had existed outside of the spotlight for so long. She stepped back from the microphone, knees shaking, heart thundering. Off stage, Graham waited. When she reached him, she was breathless, near collapse. He steadied her. No smile, just a quiet, grounding presence. "You're not just a voice," he said. "You're the sound that saved my family from silence." Jasmine opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she say to that? So she just nodded. Her hands trembled, but not from fear anymore. From power, the power of being heard. The internet moved faster than Jasmine Carter could catch her breath. By the time she stepped off the private jet the next morning, her name was everywhere. Nanny with a voice of gold, stuns, gala guests in surprise, opera debut. Jasmine Carter, the Juilliard-taught soprano who chose silence until now. Weston Arts Gala ends with unforgettable performance by unknown singer. She stared at the headlines on her phone, scrolling in disbelief as her inbox swelled with subject lines like representation inquiry, recording opportunity, and are you available for auditions? But what struck her most was the flood of messages from young black girls, women, even grandmothers, voices that whispered, "I thought the stage wasn't for us." And yet, Jasmine said no to all of it, the agents, the labels, the TV interviews. Instead, she returned home to Harlem, slipped into her studio, and stood in front of the mirror. "I'm not going to be their headline," she whispered. She had sung once, not for fame, not for attention, but because a man had reminded her that silence wasn't strength when it came from fear. So she decided to do something different. With the help of a few friends, she created something small but powerful. The ARIA Initiative, a nonprofit that provided free voice training, performance workshops, and mentorship for young black girls in underserved communities. She set it up in a church basement. No glamour, no cameras, just music. And she kept her nanny work, picking up hours here and there. Not because she had to, but because she missed the children, the bedtime stories, the tiny fingers clutching hers. Her phone stayed full of voicemails from labels. She never returned them. But one message she always answered came from Graham Weston. Not daily, not even weekly, but every so often a quiet dinner, a long walk in Central Park, conversations, not interviews, presence, not pressure. Their bond was never romantic. It was something rarer, respect. Graham never pushed her, never suggested she owed him anything. He didn't bankroll her initiative with grandstanding donations. Instead, he connected her to the right people, other artists, educators, dreamers. He became her mentor, her advocate, but mostly he just listened. And then, one day, exactly 1 year later, the letter came. Heavy cream paper, gold ink. The Metropolitan Opera cordially invites Ms. Jasmine Carter to headline a special performance in honor of women in American opera. She stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. This wasn't a gala. This was the Met, the same stage where she had once ushered guests to their seats in college for extra cash, the same venue she had once dreamed of standing inside, not in the audience, but center stage. Now they were asking for her. The performance was 6 months away. She accepted. And when the day arrived, Jasmine stood in the dressing room beneath the grand hall, staring at herself in the mirror. Her dress was simple, white, with pearl accents and no shimmer. Her natural curls were pinned back with a single gold clip. There were no stylists, no entourage, just her, a woman who once sang lullabies in the shadows. She paced once, twice. Her hands were steady. Then she opened her phone and scrolled to the photo she kept saved all these years, a blurry image from the Weston Gala. Graham had snapped it from the wings, her silhouette in the spotlight, head tilted back, mouth open in song. Below it, a message he'd once sent. You don't need to be discovered. You already exist. The world is just catching up. She smiled, then walked to the stage. The lights dimmed, the crowd quieted, and Jasmine Carter sang, this time not as a nanny, not as a novelty, but as herself. She sang Ave Maria and then O mio babbino caro, her voice rich and grounded. There was no hesitation now, no fear. In the front row sat families, musicians, dignitaries, and children. Rows of young girls from the ARIA initiative, dressed in their best, hands clutched together, mouths slightly open as they watched someone who looked like them take the stage without apology. Tears fell down more than a few cheeks. Backstage, Graham Weston stood in the shadows. He wore no tuxedo, just a simple black suit. His face was unreadable, except for the pride that glimmered behind his eyes. He didn't try to speak to her afterward. He never did. He simply nodded once when their eyes met across the hallway backstage. She nodded back, and that was enough. After the show, Jasmine walked the halls of the Met in silence, past the framed portraits of great voices long gone. Then she turned a corner and stopped. There, mounted in the glass case, was a photo of her from that night, singing, arms open, eyes closed. Below it, a simple plaque. The voice they almost silenced. She didn't cry. She simply placed her palm against the glass, then turned and walked back toward the sound of children's laughter echoing from the lobby. Because that's where her story continued. Not in headlines, not in marble halls, but in voices rising one by one because hers had finally been heard.